it got to like 1, and I was like, oh my god.
Just a heads up, the live stream. All right, let's start off before we start getting into anything tied to the position paper. Let's start talking about the assignment from yesterday. Again, this isn't going to be life-changing points or anything, but two things, I guess. Number one, I can see a lot of your current events, tying into this. It's going to dominate the news, and I'd like for you to know a little bit more of what you're talking about or what you're reading as you go into that. Two, this is not a small deal. I know that it probably feels like, here we are in Indiana. This is talking about a border wall. I know it probably doesn't feel like it impacts us, too much. But even if it only impacts you from a tax standpoint, if you have a job and you're paying taxes to your paycheck, where do you think the money's coming from for this stuff? So I think even if it's just that, it's something that we want to think about. The other thing too is that money that would be going to the wall is coming from somewhere. That's kind of how this works, is that by declaring this emergency, the president gives himself the authority to pull money from other things and send it to this project. So depending on where that money's coming from, that could be a concern as well. I asked for you guys to use some of the resources to look into this, and for those of you that were absent yesterday, so we're clear, the idea of the border wall was a campaign promise that President Trump had made when he was running 2 years ago. And it's something that he's worked towards, but he hasn't been able to get it done for the last couple of years. And as we got into January, with a new Congress taking over, we started to hear this idea that he might threaten to, A, shut down the government, and B, declare a national emergency in order to get the funding that he wanted for this wall. And so what we saw on Friday, just this past Friday, was that he, A, signed a bill to avoid the shutdown, which is definitely a good thing. B, he went ahead and declared this national emergency. And so this is going to be big on the news. I want you guys to know what all is going on. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to sort of attack this from two areas, 1 through 4 on the worksheet. Really get into just simply, what is the law? What does it allow the president to do? I don't care which president, but what does it allow him to do? And then 5 and 6 really get into what are some potential obstacles that the president might run into now that he has declared this as an emergency. All right. So let's start with 1 through 4. And I'd actually like to start with question 2. Okay, question 2 simply asks you, according to this law that was passed in the mid-70s, the National Emergencies Act, what technically defines or constitutes a national emergency? All right, what were we able to find there amongst the different sources? What do you got, Veronica? Yeah, and I think that those 2 words are the key there. That this has to threaten the health or the safety of Americans, and that's I don't care who the president is. All right, that's where it becomes tough. Right, I think that some Americans believe that a president can simply stand up and say, "We have a national emergency," and then can do anything that he wants. No, that's not what this law does. Okay? The president has to prove that there is a legitimate threat to the health and or the safety of Americans. So if we look at past national emergencies, yesterday I told you, remember what's the number? How many do we have right now? 32, okay? I don't, is that half the third? No, it's like, I don't know. Whatever. Yeah. That's probably it. I've addled your brain. Okay. All right, but we have 32 ongoing now. And the two most recent that we've seen, we had President Obama with the H1N1 virus. I mean, I think it's pretty easy to prove the health issues, the safety issues there. President Bush after 9/11, again, pretty easy to prove the safety issues. But that is a key there, is they have to justify health and safety. And another key part of this for question 2 is that it has to be a situation that is not already being dealt with by another existing law. And I think a good example of this, we're getting ready to go into drugs here, illegal drugs. So a good example from that particular world, I don't think the president's going to stand up and issue a national emergency over things like heroin use. All right? It's not that it's not a concern. It's an obvious, significant concern. However, we have laws in place that, A, make heroin illegal to use, produce, and sell. We also have laws in place that are geared towards helping those who may be dealing with heroin addiction. So with those laws in place, that limits the president if that were to be something he wanted to declare as a national emergency. On the other hand, I don't know if you guys have seen this come up in current events, but one of the big buzzwords right now is opioids. That's a significant area of concern for Congress. In fact, your Congresswoman, Susan Brooks, who represents you, that's one of her major issues of focus, is battling the opioids issue. We don't have a lot of laws in place to deal with opioids. So, if it got out of hand, that might be an area where a president could stand up and declare as a national emergency. It'd be pretty easy to prove the health issues there. So that's kind of what we're looking for there. Going back up to question 1, it's just, getting us a sense of what this law does allow the president to do. Okay. So what did some of you find for question number 1? Other than that it does allow the president to declare a national emergency, what else were you able to find in terms of what it does? Yeah, right. Yeah, okay, and a good example of that, excuse me, so we know what Braden's kind of talking about here, is that not only can the president stand up and say, I'm declaring this issue to be a national emergency, the president can also activate parts of the government that may not already be activated to deal with this particular issue. So, for example, the president can activate certain national guards within the state. This would give him the power to do that. I think, for this particular issue, this border wall issue, there is a group of the military, group of the Army to be specific, that their job is to build their construction. It's called the Army Corps of Engineers. And actually, you go to like southern Indiana deals with a lot of flooding, and especially along the Ohio. That river floods like crazy at certain times of the year. There are large, extensive series of dams that have been built. Let me give you an example here. There's a city on the Ohio River called Tell City. Have you ever heard of that? Tell City actually sits below sea level. It sits below river level, which, they're already batting in the negative through that, all right? So if that river floods, theoretically, and they have no dams to protect the city, it's going to take very little for the Ohio to then flood that city. So the Army Corps of Engineers went down there, like 50 years ago at this point, and built a series of dams that once the floodwaters rise on the Ohio, they block that getting into the city. So it affects the city. So the president could activate the Army Corps of Engineers to go down to the border and start working on this. I want to jump down to question 4. I think this is where we start to get into the interesting parts of it. As you start to see some of this in current events, people obviously feel strongly about this. You're going to see people who are okay with the border wall. You're going to see people who don't like the border wall. One of the things that I've started to see is people say, well, Congress will never let this happen. know that they have much of a choice. Right? Congress does have the power to pass a law to terminate this national emergency. Problem with it is, just like any other law, before it can go into action, it needs something from the president. What is that? Signature. President has to sign something to make it into a law. How many of you think that the president is going to sign a law terminating his own national emergency? I don't think that's going to happen. So he'll veto it, right? And then at that point, Congress could overturn that veto, but they'd have to get 2/3 of Congress to give the thumbs up. I don't think that's going to happen. All right, so I honestly, if this national emergency were to hit an end or hit an iceberg, if you will, it ain't going to be Congress that will be that iceberg. Okay? It's going to be, this gets into 5 and 6. It's going to be the courts, if anyone, that throws monkey wrenches into the president's plan. All right. So 5 and 6, I'm really kind of focused in on 5. All right. You know, what complications could arise? Were any of you able to find potential complications breaking out?
No, I'm
Oh.
do you mean?
I'm talking complications, period. Complications that might end up making this whole thing never happen. Yeah, Hunter, what do you got?
Congress standing against it.
And Congress, I mean, you know, that's a theoretical possibility. Do I think Congress could actually do anything? I don't. They could give a lot of speeches, though, that could maybe sway public opinion, but that's about it. All right, Veronica, do you have one?
In terms of like lawsuits,
Yeah, that's where things start to get interesting, guys. 16 states have already filed lawsuits against the president for overreach of government power. And this is, I think, an interesting note here with us talking federalism here, which is this ongoing debate over who has more power, states and national. 16 states. I mean, that's a chunk. That's a percentage. You know that they have to see. A lot of those are border states. You know, California is one of those states. I think that's worth noting. Indiana is not one of those 16, but they have filed a lawsuit now. Would anything come out of those lawsuits? I don't know. But it could bog things down, right? Slow things down. Courts are not fast movers. So the time that it takes to clear out 16 different lawsuits, that could take a while, which could slow down the building of the wall, right? Yeah. They would go to, I mean, they're suing the federal, so they would probably start a federal district court, which we'll get to those eventually in this class, but it would start the federal court. I think the other issue that I think is going to be really interesting here is that in order for large, like miles and miles and miles of section of this wall to be built, the government's going to have to take people's homes. All right, we talked about that not too long ago, that the government. Yeah, it's exactly like that. Eminent domain. It's called eminent domain, or the takings clause. It's in the Fifth Amendment. It says that the government can take your property if it's for legitimate government use. Now, they have to pay you for it, but they have to show that it's legitimate government use. I mean, you know, there's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that live near the border. Right? You know, this wall is going to have to go through their homes, through their backyards. Government's going to have to buy those properties. I promise you, those people are going to sue. Those people are going to fight them. They don't want to give up their homes, and I don't blame them. You know, it's their home. You know, so they're going to sue. Add all of those potential lawsuits to the 16 states that have sued. This is where things are going to get complicated. This is not. I'm telling you, this is not going to be one of those things where you're going to see shovels in the ground tomorrow. You know, this is going to be a long, drawn-out process. And the reason why I note that is this, and I'm going to kind of leave this discussion there. You know, President Trump has less than 2 years left in this term. if he were to get defeated in 2020, and let's say whoever emerges from the 85 different Democrats who are running right now, let's say that person ends up winning. I could see that person saying, national emergency over, we're, no wall, and then it was all for naught. Yeah. That's how you guys want that. We'll talk about that in a second. Yeah, so that's some background on what's going on here. I don't expect you guys to be expert on what's going on, but it was important that I think that you guys spend some time with the law, because I would be shocked if I didn't get current events tied to this law of the national emergency and everything like that. All right, hey, what questions do you still have? I know you may not have everything answered just yet. That's okay, but I do want to give you some points on this. Basically, it's basically a completion assignment. Let's be honest here. So if you've got questions, you can let me know. Yeah, I mean they can determine things like like I said, the Fifth Amendment says that you have to prove that it's legitimate government use. So they could look at it and say it's not legitimate government use, and they could find in favor of those people. They could listen to these state lawsuits and say the states have a legitimate claim here. All right, if we can, I want to move on. This took a little bit of time here, first period, so I want to kind of move on here. I had to laugh. Somebody came in today and saw that I had a position paper up here and said, "Mr. Klein, you're killing me." I'm not going to say who that was. All right. But I know you guys are writing a lot. I know you guys are writing a lot. It wasn't. It's okay. It's okay. Look, I totally know you guys are writing a lot. I get that, and I make you write a lot. But I don't really apologize for it. I'm a believer that I don't care where you're going after this. I don't care where you need to have some skill in writing. And for me, it's not so much about like the grammar and stuff. I'm gonna let Mrs. Decker handle that. Okay. You're welcome. All right. What I'm almost entirely focused on is whether or not you can not just express your opinion on something. Yeah, but can you give me an informed, justified opinion? That's the only reason that I do this, because I love reading. I'm really interested in that. Not just hear what you have to say, but just to watch you take your opinion and get some backing to it. All right, and I think this is a really big topic here, and it's very current event driven. And I just think that it is a phenomenal example of what we've been talking about for the past week, and that is federalism. Right? So before we get into this that I just handed out, quick reminder. Federalism is when you have the power of a government divided on different levels. And in the United States, the national government has power, the states have power of their own. And I gave you a rule of thumb when it comes to identifying state power. You remember what that is? How do you know if something is a state power? If it ain't in the Constitution, then it should belong to the states. Okay? You guys don't need to open up the Constitution to answer this. How many times is marijuana discussed in the Constitution? Right? I mean, it's obviously zero. Were people lighting it up back in 1789?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Ben Franklin was pretty wild. Who knows? Okay, people were doing cocaine back then. All right, people were doing mild versions of heroin back then. All right, this was a thing. Was marijuana something? I don't know. All right, but I guarantee you they weren't going to waste the space and put it in the Constitution. So theoretically, based on the rule of thumb, who should be making the decisions regarding whether or not marijuana should be legal? Okay. I heard it, right? States, right? But that's not how things have played out. The national government has taken this over. But that's what we're looking at here. Who should be making the decisions about the legalization of marijuana? Should it be the states or should it be the federal? Right? So what I want to do today is give you some background and some things to think about as you start to approach your position paper. Right? And I've given you an article here. And it's very, very short. And what I'm going to ask for you to do as we get started is I'm going to ask for you guys, and you can use a pen. If you have a highlighter, you can use that. I've got some you can borrow. I really don't care what you use. But I'm going to give you guys just a couple of questions. All right? And I may shut at least one set of the lights off so you can see it. But I've got this question here. A couple questions here. Basically 3 questions, first 3 bullets. And I'd like for you to highlight, to circle, to underline, however you want to do it, where in the article these 3 questions are answered, all right? So we have a situation here. You might be able to read the date if you could read my chicken scratch. December 2004. So this comes from a little while ago. All right? It involves a woman named Diane Monson. And what I want to know, number 1, where in the article does it answer why was her home raided by the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA? Why did DEA agents raid her home? Secondly, all right, you're going to be reading about that Diane Monson had some marijuana plants in her home. Why did she think she was okay with this? All right, we're not talking about Diane Monson, major drug dealer here. And that was not her plan. All right, she willingly admitted, yeah, I got marijuana growing here. All right, she did not feel like that was a problem. The question 2 is why? Why did she think it was okay to be growing marijuana? And then down here, this 3rd question. As the national government justified the raid on her home, they started talking about something called interstate commerce. So where in the article does it start getting into that? All right, so I'm going to give you a few minutes. If you have somebody sitting beside you, you want to say, oh, yeah, here's where I found it, that's fine. All right, but highlight, circle, underline where in the article it answers these 3 questions, and then we'll talk about that here in just a minute. I'm only going to give you a minute on it, so let's get rolling on it. No pun intended. Interstate commerce, commerce and business. Interstate, 2 of our states. That'd be business state. Yeah, if you're sitting there thinking, what the heck is interstate commerce? That's okay. I will clear that up. papers that are coming around right now, you guys can just set off to the side. These are the position paper guidelines. Get into that shortly here. But just another minute here. Identify some of the answers here. As you read this, I mean, I think that the idea of state versus national should be coming through clearly.
It sounded like that thing from the- yeah.
If you're having trouble with the third one, that's okay. We'll get into that. Are we good with 1 and 2 at least?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead and start rolling through this. God, I keep saying that. Rolling through it. All right. So right off the bat on the article, we get into this disagreement between state and national. And in the first paragraph, I mean, it sets the stage here. Local sheriff's deputies and FDA agents, or DEA agents, sorry, disagree right there. It says state local is disagreeing with federal government. They're all at this woman's house in California, and the DEA is getting ready to raid it. And the local deputies are saying, no, you have no grounds to raid this woman's house, right? What is in that house, right? So the first question here, what is in that home that the DEA agents are trying to get? Okay, can we be more specific, all right? Are we talking about like Pineapple Express, huge areas of marijuana? Okay, and I think that's key. She has 6 marijuana plants, and excuse me, we get into the second paragraph here. County cops have accepted Monson's explanation for growing 6 marijuana plants. She has doctor's permission to smoke it for back pain. It's legal under the state's medical marijuana law. So let me put this up here right now. All right, we have 2 laws in play here: federal law and the state law. Federal law is much older, 1970. Guys, I'm going to tell you right now. I mean, I wasn't even alive at that point, but I can tell you that was a very different time when it came to drugs. All right, we had the same drugs. It's just that it was we were looking at them a little bit differently. This was right in the middle of a campaign that President Nixon had underway. This was the beginning of what was called the War on Drugs. All right, that went into the Reagan presidency as well. All right, so this was a sweeping law, and it identified specific drugs that the DEA could monitor if you were using it, selling it, making it, and if so, they could arrest you. So it had crack, it had heroin, it also had marijuana on that list. All right, so keep that in mind. Even though they knew that that law existed, California passed their own law called the Compassionate Use Act, which, by the way, I've given you a copy of on the back of the article if you want to see what the state law looks like. That did allow for marijuana use when it was prescribed by a physician. So I want to be clear, this is not making recreational use legal. Okay, this is not, that guy who wants to just toke it up just for fun. This does not give him the power to do that. It is if you have a physician prescription. And I would point out, if you guys can look at the back there and look at the state law, okay, the big paragraph there, first big paragraph, letter A, it actually lists specific diseases for which the doctor can give you the prescription. Cancer, anorexia, AIDS, chronic pain, so there's that back pain that Diane Monson was talking about, spasticity, which we looked up in first period because I didn't know what it was, and it sounded an awful lot like a Tourette's type of thing. It was like an involuntary muscle spasms. Glaucoma, arthritis, migraine. Okay, so that's what the doctor could prescribe it for. but you had to have that prescription. She had that. She provided it, and as it says in the article, the state and local officials were perfectly fine with it. Okay? My question to you is this: did Diane Monson break the federal law? Yes or no? Sure, she did, right? I mean, she had marijuana. Whether you agree with that law or not, she broke the law. Did she break the state law? No. So that's where we've got this conflict here that we've got to deal with. Yeah. Yes. That's a good question. That's what we're getting into here. Okay. Should this be a state issue? Should they be allowed to make their own law? Or should this national law be what we have to deal with? Okay? So that's what we're looking at. Okay? So real quick here, she's growing cannabis in her home. They destroyed that. Why? Because she broke the law. Why did she think she was okay? Because she wasn't breaking the state law. I think we've done a good job of owning up to that, right? So this is our question. Who should be responsible for making laws like this? I'm not expecting you to take notes, obviously, but let's talk about interstate commerce, because that is how the national government is making this seem okay. Okay? Interstate, anything involving 2 or more states. Have you ever driven on an interstate highway? All right, it's a highway like 69 that goes between 2 or more states. Commerce is anything involving business. And it is very clearly stated in the Constitution. Congress has the power to regulate interstate commerce. So what the government is saying is that we can regulate things like marijuana. We can pass that law because marijuana is a commodity which you could grow in one state and sell to somebody in another state. See how that works? Yes, no, yes, thumbs up, we good? Okay, so that's how they're making this justified, is they're saying that you could grow it here and sell it there. That gives us the power to regulate. Okay, they go on here to say, look, even if you're using it or growing it, as Diane Monson was, for your medical purposes, what happens if you grow enough for, clearing up your cataracts, and then you have a little extra? And so you decide, hey, I can make a little buck here, sell it to little Tommy in Idaho, who's looking to get high. What? So when they looked at the estimates here, this is 2004. 100,000 people in California would technically qualify for medical marijuana. So the concern here for the national government is, what if all of 100,000 have a little extra that they decide to sell? That becomes an interstate conversation. I'm not saying you have to agree with any of it. I'm just saying that's what the national government is. What's the case against the government? Well, Diane Monson said, look, I'm not a drug peddler here. I got 6 plants growing in the basement because my back pain is really bad. The doctor says it will feel better by smoking marijuana. I don't know if that works. Right? We're not going to have a lab as part of this. Okay? So, but that's her idea. Look, I'm not selling. I'm not selling. I'm only doing this. You cannot just assume that I'm going to sell. That's her argument. Okay? So I asked. The last part of that just simply said predict. Okay, this case is going to go all the way to the Supreme Court. Do you think the Supreme Court says, we like what the national government is saying, or do you think the Supreme Court agrees with this lady in California? Okay. Oh, there we go. All right, 2004, 6-3 in favor of the national government. They thought that was a good argument that they were making. Yeah, even though this seems like it's localized, it's just this woman and her 6 plants. It's the could. It's the what could happen. That's where they had to find. Now, that should end the discussion, right? It should be done now. Well, not so much. Okay, wrap it up with this. Some current event-ish type of stuff here. In 2009, the Obama administration basically came out and said, there's the quote up there if you want to read it, but basically said, look, we have got countless issues that we're dealing with. Opioids, heroin, cocaine. We've got all of these issues that we're trying to battle, and we just don't think marijuana is the same level of drug. It has not been proven to be addictive. Biggest argument that people make is that it's a gateway drug. All right. Now, they're not saying that the Obama administration didn't say, hey, we love marijuana. In fact, they made it clear here. We will not tolerate drug trafficking. But if it's just little Susie with, cataracts, we're not going to sweat that. Okay? We're not going to sweat. We're going to let the states do their thing. And we're not going to challenge it. And so almost immediately, states started to pass marijuana legalization. Colorado and Washington got us going. Initially, Colorado was just medical marijuana. They have since legalized recreational use. That is why there are people in Colorado right now. This is their job. They have right next to the Starbucks is the marijuana dispensary. Okay. There you can buy pot. Now you can only buy so much, but you can buy it. All right, don't back up on me yet, guys. We still got some time here. All right. Here's the deal, guys. The biggest argument I think that comes up in favor of states being able to do this is the money. Okay, take a look at that. In the first 5 months of 2014, after Colorado legalized marijuana, they taxed the crap out of it. Oh, they just taxed it. If you want to smoke it, okay, but man, you're going to pay taxes. All right, those taxes allowed for Colorado to make $15.3 million profit, tax revenue, just in those first 5 months. You added medical marijuana, $23.6 million. That's a lot of potholes. Again, no pun intended. Okay, that's a lot of highway repair. That's a lot of budget. Now, we've seen arguments coming through suggesting that rampant marijuana use does contribute possibly negatively to humans. Well, that may be. I'm not telling you what you should think here. All right, but what I want you guys to think about with this position paper, if you guys can look at that real quick, right? This is what I came around and gave you. The article, this was just to give you some things to think about, some background to get you started on this. We've done a position paper before. I shouldn't have to explain what one of those is. I will say this. A lot of times when people miss points the first time around, it's because they were wishy-washy. You got to take a position on this prompt. You either agree with that statement or you disagree with that statement. There's no middle. Pick a position and then justify the position. The prompt says states should have complete say over the issue of marijuana legalization. All right, so think about what we've talked about today. Think about the Monson story. Do you feel like the national government made a good point there? Or do you think ultimately this should be up to the states to make the decision that they want? All right? I don't care which position you take. I'm just saying, take one and justify that position. Justify that position. All right? I have given you some questions at the bottom. Do these have to come up in your position paper? No. These are just some things to think about as you're trying to formulate your position. Some things to look for if you're looking for some resources. Right? I do want to make one change here. The due date will be Friday, not Thursday. Okay? Friday. From this point forward, tomorrow, Thursday, and all day Friday, I'm giving you nothing else. All right? Come into class. This is what you're working on, and I am going to be a stickler on that. All right? I don't want to see math going on, no English. This has got to be the priority while you're in here. I would love to sit down and talk with you. If you have questions about this, honestly, those were some great combos on the first position paper. I was able to sit down with students, answer some questions, talk to them, and happy to do that over the next couple of days. But when you come in, this is what you're focused on in here. We're talking about a page, right? This is not a lengthy paper by any stretch. If you go beyond that, that's fine, but it's got to be at least that full page. Keep that in mind as we start moving through. Any questions for me? Okay, that's it for me. Okay, make sure you guys are bringing this stuff back tomorrow so we can get to work on it. What?
There's no point in me sitting and listening to her talk when everything that she's saying is going to go through one ear and out the other.
Oh my goodness. I don't know, you know. I don't know. I don't know.
She said, "Do you want to have lunch with?"
You can't text grab it.
Oh, well, I mean, we call it a sin tax. We do it with alcohol. We do it with cigarettes. We do it with chewing tobacco. We do it with vape pods. All right, you're paying crazy amounts of sales tax. Did I use the wrong term? I don't have any experience with it.
Hey, I don't either. Have any experience with what? Big pods.
What's the correct term?
Big pods. Yes. Well, it's like yes, but no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gang, gang. Oh, good golly. Yes, sir.
This one even ties into like these kind of not really the vote but what we talked about earlier, like the federalism and stuff. That one weekly. I think it was the first.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. Yeah, is that it ties into that.
The law that they actually passed on it, I was like, how could they pass it when? But I mean, it's technically, you know, their implied powers because they or the necessary act because they can do it.
Yeah, and there's there's sometimes where it's funny because it's like a case by case basis. We had an issue come up just probably 10 years ago now involving cable television, where the FCC or the Federal Communications Commission was telling local news stations, here's how much you can charge for advertising, things like that. And these local television stations are like, look, we're Montana News. You can't come in here and tell us what we can and cannot do. And so, it was almost exactly like this. Obviously not marijuana, but this idea that yes, you're Montana News, but people in North Dakota, South Dakota could watch you. And it's online. So heck, if I'm here in Indiana and I really want to watch Montana News, I can watch it. So that crosses state lines, and so that and the court found again in favor of Congress and the national government and said that's interstate commerce. So I don't know. There's definitely two sides to this argument. So I'm excited to see where you guys land.
See you, Mr. Carney.
See you later, Tristan. Hi, Kayla. How you feeling? Holding it together? I can't read that.
That means I'm working on it.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciated you coming over and kind of letting loose on me. Anytime you need to do that, that's why they pay me the big bucks. Okay.
Yeah, I feel really comfortable with you. So
Well, I appreciate that. That's an awesome thing to hear.
like your body.
Like your mom.
I'll see you here in a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi. What's up?
What?
What do we got for lunch today?
He's like, I just.
I know.
What was that, Tim? That was abuse. He's walked by and punched me.
Felicity.
Felicity. They spelled her name wrong?
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
It's P-Y-S. They put P-Y. They put P-Y-L-I-S-S. What do you mean?
So you just got the H.
Don't barbecue a butt beside. Barbecue a butt beside.
She does?
For sure.
It was him? Boy.
Oh. Hello.
Almost sounds like a afternoon, sir.
Hey, what's happening?
Stocks. Let's go check our stocks.
Fine. I was in 54th place in first period. It was the stock times, and when it went up, I got 8th place. And I was like 5th. It's because I invested in one. I don't know how. What's the investment? One stock?
No, I think I've got 3 stocks on there now.
Brady tried to also on my stocks. He tried doing it and he went back down.
Yeah, because everybody forgets the commission fee.
Yeah, you can.
If you forget the commission fee.
Can I skip?
Why would you out of my girl class?
Yeah, I need help with my position paper.
I need help with life. I'm nervous.
I think it's cool though. There was one
Tell me
stock
what
I
your
made
weight
me
is.
like 75.
Oh, I can't even see it.
I made like $75.
I can't remember what it is, but I've got a stock right now that if I sold at this moment, I would make
Recent found.
Shopify. Shopify.
She's like, all right, Haley. New bowling, I'm saying. Why would you do that? I'm gonna try to. She did the workout thing. I was like, I'm gonna stay out.
That's a handshake.
I think 3 of them in here.
If I ever go to school, I'm gonna make you break character.
Yeah, I only have.
Why is there $3 in here?
One is Whitney.
I wasn't.
But there's 3.
I was laughing.
I like my stocks.
Yes. There's like
Wait, what am I in?
Mine. Here it is, number 19.
I was in 54.
Okay. That bow mega sauce.
Nope. It was fun.
That's the field.
oh my god. Hey, are we standing?
Yeah, it's left, man.
I don't like to go out.
I know, you look like I'm feeling grabbed. I'm saving one of mine. Really? I gave you that idea.
I started dying and laughing. Oh, what?
You can work on journals or you can work on stations. Both do. You guys had a big head start. You guys were able to get a lot of stuff done yesterday. Here we go, Taylor. I was concerned there. Journals. This, however. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm reusing the codes. But I'll do I would think you would have.
I don't know, it's on me.
That's all right.
Yeah, how are you?
All right, folks. Hey, listen up. Listen up. Just wanted to point out real quick, I'm destroying you all in the stock market. Now that we've got that over with, now I can seriously. I would say that the one that's got me the most is Shopify. It's like a Groupon thing. I can sell that stock right now and make $500 profit. That's me. All right. Today you got two. I don't know if I want to call them options, but two must-dos. The journals, which if you are right now sitting with no journals done, the amount of sympathy that I feel for you couldn't be lower. Okay. These have been things that we've been working on since January. So that really should not be a stressor unless you've just decided, well, wait till the day they're due and then write them all in. And if that's the case, then may God have mercy on your soul. Those are due today. And that due date's been out there for a long time, so please be mindful of that. Other than that, it's the Great Depression stations. You guys also had a leg up on that. You had the whole period yesterday to work on that. My hope is that you did that. And hopefully, maybe there's just a few that you need to finish up. But those codes are around the room. Remember, there is one of these stations that you will not use. So choose wisely. Let me know how I can help you. And other than just another quick reminder that, I'm destroying you all in the stock market, then you guys have the rest of it. Dude, I am almost at 20,500. I'm so far above. You know what, Tim? Whatever makes you feel better. No, second one. I'm not gonna give myself. I know. You said shame? You want me to shame? Oh, good. You want me to? What about the shame? Where are you throwing shade at me from? Hey, I'm hip.
You were not.
I'm shit.
I try to do it like
maybe like a defensive slide. Yes, well, how can I? Okay. So what I'm asking for here is, let's say that we were to have another depression. Right? Is it the government? Is it the U.S. government's job to try to hold you out of this by giving us a job, or are we sort of on our own? Should we figure out how to get ourselves out of this?
I was gonna do it Friday and yesterday, but I didn't.
Gabby?
that's not even just a possibility.
Well, I mean, I bought those stocks, the three stocks I bought them. They are. Well, the thing that Jane and I were talking about, so if you sell it, $10 is coming off. So the only profit that was on there was $9. You should stay there.
Did we finish our papers yesterday?
Did you click on Victor? Alright, so, bring that, space right there, where it says
Give it dislike them.
start typing in a couple.
I know.
Look at all these.
No.
I don't like it.
Well, let's say if you buy one share, you have none right now. No, you're buying a share of the company. So if you buy one share and it takes $100, you get $100. But if you buy 50 shares, I would buy. That's it.
Oh my gosh.
Well, at least you're not, anything like that. Hey, who moved Washington? Honestly, I don't know. Did he move? Oh. Yesterday was his birthday. I think he maybe got into the meet.
Surprised by.
I don't know where he got. Yes. Caleb, is this on the assignment?
Oh, I'm 28.
How do you turn them in? Okay, just go to the blue share button. And start typing in Kevin Klein.
Anyone else's?
Like that, hit the blue button at the bottom.
That's all I had to do. That was my second question.
All right, so, well, you haven't bought it.
Is it about this?
Yeah, I'll tell you right now.
Let me see.
Wait, what do we do to get the extra credit?
I wanted to make
Oh, yeah. How do we get the extra credit?
Well, like, okay,
Dollars?
so.
I know, I don't know how this works. I'm just selling stuff, buying stuff, getting rid of stuff. So if I have $20,000, that's it, I cash, that means I got that credit.
No, because I can click on it, start looking and it actually buys stuff. And then you go the extra credit. I want to buy like,
Hey, does that say that somewhere on here? Like, does it tell me? 28.
now, is there a red arrow?
So right now. So you would actually. Well, what I
Oh, yep, there is definitely a red arrow.
This is how much, so this is right here. Okay, that's up to one share. Right now.
Audrey, you're a first. Yeah.
Who?
Audrey first. You're in second.
Wait, it's on. I'll deal with things later, guys.
Yeah, we have to have a green arrow.
I don't know what I'm doing, honestly. I'm just kind of selling things, buying things. Is that fine? I think that's it. Why am I?
That shows me in first. Fake news.
Hey, yeah, just change.
Fake news. Aha, Audrey. I'm going to throw shade. What?
So I saw Amazon and I had bought it.
No.
Yeah, it was down and it said negative 19.
Oh. So if it said negative 19, that means you might have lost 19.
Okay, so on this. Okay, so I sold that.
Well, what we want to do. So you own this, right?
Yeah.
The place to tell what you're doing. Just look at how this one here. Okay, so this right you get a bigger profit, but you also lose stuff. So, if you were to buy more, the 10% they take would make less of an impact on get profit. So you would make more profit. Rather than you to buy one stock, you get 10%. So if you made
That's 20,000.
I don't know.
You can buy it.
Your portfolio also your library.
Losing money like last time.
No problem. Taylor, what stock cycle? You're not rolling in the debt. Well, you can team up with Gavin.
I literally sold it.
Well, you think I'm gonna help you?
I don't like this game. Negative, okay, all my things are green, but I'm negative 44 seconds. See that? Like, literally, all my things are always green.
Yeah, but you're forgetting the question.
I don't know how to do this. Like this.
Yeah. You have to have your profit in double digits to actually represent legitimate profit. Because for every single stock you own.
28th to 43rd.
Nobody will jump back to come back.
I don't think so.
I don't know.
Sounds like Bing Crosby.
Yeah, remember that initially when you buy it, it's
I don't like this game. I know. And yeah, games are supposed to be fun. And I usually win at games, but I don't like this game.
I feel like Hannah's got to flip that table. Like risk. Yes, sir.
You can't win in a game.
If you go to your portfolio, right beside the stock, it'll say trade in a red box. That's what you have. What do you want, Rastetter? Bro, and Rachel's turn giving me shade. Yeah. Every day, right for lunch.
Well, usually
No. I smell.
I'm happy in the morning. Maybe somebody I know, but the questions like, what? Yeah. That's so true. What? And then Gabby's just like, what? I'll tell like a whole 5-minute story.
I got the song.
I know. I'm looking.
See this one?
why. I need the home.
What?
I need to know where to find these notes.
Sounds like
You're
you.
putting me on your right hand, so.
Your cousin's in that. Gosh, did I forget to tell you?
I hope.
This is projecting right now.
No.
I'm thinking that's the same thing.
Oh, no. Way to go, Mr. Klein.
I don't know what I said.
I don't think it's on.
I don't think it's
Oops a daisy. Everybody's ready. I'm affected.
Amazing.
Hold on, I gotta turn off my.
Wait, that's been going the whole time?
Yeah.
We said some bad things about James.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I don't care.
She said, no, I don't care.
Yeah, but